Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here. We got a great show lined up for you today. Josh Walkos is going to be joining us not just to talk about the current administration, but really the technopoly that keeps ever growing, the connections not just to the Muskernuts, but Sam Altman and others. You're not going to want to miss it. Buckle up and get ready to make sense of the madness. Now, Josh, you and I have known each other for a few years now. A lot of your work really does revolve on globalism, the technocracy, the technologies that are pushing forward no matter who is in office. And right now, it seems like it's round two for Sam Altman. There was a lot of hype behind Altman when ChatGPT went from 3 to 4, and then you had the controversial firing, then the rehiring. You had the Musk-Trump love affair and the fallout, and now you got Sam Altman at the White House. First and foremost, what is your view on this guy, and what shaped that opinion?
Well, his actions shaped my opinion. I don't even really, know where he came from in the first place. He just at the highest levels of power. They're getting ready to release this Chat GPT 5. They just released the agent, which basically takes over your computer for you and can do various tasks for you. But I don't really trust him at all as far as what his intentions are. I know he has a big feud with Musk, and there's lawsuits going on. But he's just another technocrat, like every other technocrat right now, like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, all these guys who are basically creating a surveillance system that's going to be embedded into our society if we don't do something about it or push back on it pretty soon.
So let's talk about the different aspects of that surveillance society, because one of the things that really alarmed me about Altman, and like you said, really came on the scene within the last few years, was the first time you were really hearing about him on the national stage. It's not just this AI technology and the GPTs that are now becoming more like AGIs, aka chatbots with a persona that are very, very hard to differentiate from people. But he also has the Worldcoin project, in which he has incorporated the blockchain, biometrics
Mm-hmm.
into a system of payment. And although this was launched a little over 2 years ago, it's just within the last, I think, 5 or 6 months that they've moved their offices into the United States of America, LA, Silicon Valley in particular. And now they're invading the United States in major centers like Nashville, Tennessee. I believe they've got one in Arizona. The original one before they moved here, you could only scan your iris for the Worldcoin under the World Trade Center in New York City. So, what are your thoughts on this expansion? Because there's a lot of people talking about a CBDC, but I don't think they understand that
Yeah.
you can have multiple different types of currencies on the blockchain that don't necessarily have to be totally centralized, but go in that centralized fashion. Because, as you know, everything on the blockchain, at least for now, is forever.
It's trackable. Yeah, a lot of people have a misconception about blockchain and how it works. It's basically a public ledger where everything that is done on it is able to be tracked, and basically, like you said, they're forever. The WorldCoin is, for people who don't know, it's basically scanning people's faces in their iris. It's giving you a unique ID that then you can get certain cryptocurrencies. WorldCoin is the one that they have, but you can get cryptocurrencies that then you can use. I see this as like a first step towards universal basic income. Is because you hear these guys talking about this all the time, and they talk about it because they know the technology that they're rolling out is going to basically destroy industries, and people aren't going to have anything to do because even white collar jobs. You know what I mean? They're gonna, the programming, the coders, all that. They're gonna basically create this system. They're creating the problem and giving you the solution, the Hegelian dialectic, basically. And the UBI is what, if you hear these guys talking enough, they'll always go back to this idea of universal basic income because of the way that AI is going to displace society in certain jobs and industries.
So, with that universal basic income, again, the sale on this is that they're taking your biometric information because they have to verify that you're human. And one of the big things with AI that we're finding out more and more and more is that they can not only replicate images, they can not only replicate your voice, but there are voice changers in real time. For instance, right now,
if I want to go full Musker nuts, we can go full Musker nuts. And it was as simple
as hitting a button. And that's commercially available to myself. They're saying that this coin is going to allow digital transactions and ensure that it is you as a human being. Yet, the same technology has already been utilized by the World Economic Forum, the IMF, and their partners for their refugee program, where you've had these refugee centers where they are scanning your face, your iris, and then deciding where in the refugee camp you're going to stay, where in the refugee camp and when you're going to receive food, where outside of the refugee camp you're going to find work. And if this isn't a beta test for what we're talking about, I mean, even the Worldcoin that came out with the Lochnar-like orb to suck your soul, they now have the Orb Mini, which looks a lot like your cell phone. So they're acclimating people even further. Yeah. Do you think there's going to be competitors in this space, or do you think that this is going to be the one they push as kind of like that social media kind of thing for the youth to get involved?
I think that's probably going to be the main one, but there's unlimited possibilities on like tokenization and type of coins that you can use and program for certain types of commerce and things of that nature. So, but OpenAI seems to be leading the way, and they're, you know, the company that is kind of in the consciousness that could be used sort of as the Trojan horse to acclimate the general public into using this technology. And, you know, there's people just don't understand the wave of AI and this technology that's directly coming right at us right now. They think, oh, it's just a cool thing to go to replace a Google or something like that to do some research. But I'm already seeing articles and things about this where people, I think it was like 75% of teenagers said that they used it as a companion or like therapy. If you log on to OpenAI and or the ChatGPT, you know how it gives you little boxes at the bottom of suggestions. One of the suggestions you'll see is therapy. So they're actually pushing this out for people to interact with it to replace humans and tell people their deepest, darkest thoughts and profile them and use it as like a therapist. And all it's going to do is drive people crazy, in my opinion, even more than they already are at this point.
Well, I think one of the things that people do not realize about artificial intelligence, especially the chatbot phenomenon, is that it is truly a reflection of yourself and what you are willing to submit to. And I mean that in the sense that you talked about research, right? And you start asking these chatbots or Grok or Google's artificial intelligence a question, and they'll give you a baseline of information. But if you're already studied on that information, you'll notice that it's trying to sway you in a certain direction, or it may omit things on purpose, or just come up with things, hallucinations that don't exist. Now, you bring up something that is integral to your question that they didn't put out there, and what do they say? Oh, you're so smart. Yeah, we forgot that. And then if you challenge them further, they'll say, because they were being deceptive, they'll say, well, you're right to question me. And they constantly pander to the individual, making them think they're the superior being, when really you're just being corralled into, I would say, your own narrative echo chamber. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's very sycophantic when you start interacting with it. And like you just said, it will only give you certain information. If you question it, it's always going to come back and say, hey, you know, you were correct, I was wrong in that. So it's basically just a merry-go-round of being a sycophant and a yes man in a sense. It's telling you what you want to hear. I mean, there are uses for it as far as just doing general research and compiling different links, but you always got to go back and check it, make sure that it's accurate. But the narrative that it's telling you is always within like the politically correct realm. You know, if you ask, say, I see people on Twitter talking about Grok and asking them about it's always going to say the canned line that it's safe and effective. You know, there's no, it's been widely used and there isn't lots of, there's very rare side effects. It's like coming right from the CDC website. So it's never going to reveal truth to you. It's just going to basically let you hear what you want to hear. And if you try and correct it, it still is not going to give you the information that you want. You have to actually do the work and do the reading, and instead of letting the machine do the reading for you.
Let me give you just an example of how deceptive even Grok is. I asked Grok about the FBI document regarding the Epstein case in 2008, in which Epstein is clearly providing information to the FBI in concurrence with the sentence that they give him. They can't even find the document. I start talking about the FBI and Epstein, and they want to talk about this document and that document. In fact, if you try to even do a Google image search for that document, good luck finding it. I have to go to DuckDuckGo. I have to go through 25 images that aren't even what I'm looking for. And then, lo and behold, I'm able to find that image of a real document that has just been disappeared basically online. And remember, Google made its name and really its reputation out of being the #1 search engine. And a lot of people don't know this, Josh, but you do the work. The way they were able to get that algorithm for that search engine, it came directly from NASA and DARPA in the National Library Initiative, where they were trying to digitize all information that was physically available. Now, I would make the contention they did digitize a vast majority of that information, but now it is being withheld from the public or simply erased. I mean, they're even attacking outlets like the Internet Archive, which was doing an okay job of archiving things, but still was a far way off. How do we combat those type of systems? Because as you know, at the end of the day, AI is essentially programmed. It has guardrails. And as they literally siphon information away from the public, they change those guardrails.
Yeah, it's the new gatekeeper. Basically, it's really hard to say how we combat that unless you're, individuals like myself or yourself, where we're actually doing the research and saving and archiving and making sure that it's not on the net, it's downloaded on our computer. But it's for the everyday person. It's everybody. It's hard to tell what you can do to combat it because, like I said, they're erecting this basically surveillance state. That is under the guise of progress, and it's replacing Google. Replacing Google, you can, at least on Google, you can go through get past the first 10 search results and maybe dig deep and try and find something that'll pop up. But with like Perplexity or OpenAI, the way that they give you the links and the sources, it's basically, here's what we found for you. It's hard to even drill down and find anything further from it. And it is very sycophantic, like I said. So it's just going to tell you what you want to hear. It's replacing people's brains and making people just dumb in general at this point. When you're on Twitter, you see every time somebody brings up something that they're skeptic about. Hey, Grok, is this true? You know what I mean? You see it constantly on Twitter. It drives me nuts. Like Grok's going to actually tell you whether it's true, but they accept it. Like, oh, okay, well, Grok said it, so it must be true, or what he's saying must be bullshit because Grok thinks it's bullshit. But we're basically offshoring our critical thinking capacity to these giant organizations that are, like I said, again, this is going to be, it's about surveillance and corralling us into certain modes of thought. Even with the new AI agent, the ChatGPT agent, if you've seen that, you're essentially giving the agent permission to access your Gmail, all of your computer, do things on your behalf. Who's to say that somebody's not going to get a hold of that? Or in a recent interview with Altman, I think it was with Theo Vaughn, he said that there's no law stating that the authorities can't come to them and say, hey, you have to tell us what they've been searching and give us access to their chat logs. So it's just the same way as all these other companies, Facebook, Google, that have been and Instagram, that have capitulated to authorities to give them access to these things when it's come to certain investigations and things like that. So we're basically back to square one, and it's just tightening noose around our neck, and it's full speed ahead too with Trump and what's the name of this new project they have where they're building all this AI? Yeah, Stargate. I mean, this thing is going full speed ahead with virtually zero input from the public. and they're framing it like a Cold War and Cold War rhetoric. You know what I mean? We have to do this because we don't want to let China get ahead of us on this. So we have to surpass all these normal democratic mechanisms to get invest all this money and billions of dollars into it. But we have no say in it, and they're just going full steam ahead. And there's all kinds of problems with these data centers too. I've been reading about it, trying to understand where these are going, and like the sound, the noise that it causes with people living around it, the water problems people are having, and these are like gigantic infrastructures that's just siphoning off energy for these communities, and they have no say in it whatsoever.
So the Kentucky data center being built by Meta is about 2/3 the size of Lower Manhattan. And again, they're going to be running on mini nuclear reactors that are built on site. For those that don't know how nuclear power actually works, all it's doing is heating the water for steam, folks. Those are the water problems that you were discussing. And for me, that really just shows the hypocrisy that nuclear power has been demonized the last several decades. They're not giving it to you or I, so we're going to get cheaper energy. No, they're going to pump it into these AI data centers. All of a sudden, our carbon footprint doesn't seem to matter as much, although they'll still go with that rhetoric. One other thing I wanted to touch on, several things I wanted to touch on when we get to AI, but you mentioned Google and now these AI results that kind of give you this truncated AI overview. Were you aware now in your live streams via YouTube or your premieres, they try to check and a live chat AI overview and not the live chat replay? You actually have to go into your settings now. Like say I premiere a video on YouTube, right? So you know how when you premiere, the live chat is there automatically, right? And it's there because that's part of the premiere. You have to set it up for that premiere, then you have to go back in and edit it. You have to go down in the very first panel and pick more so you can even see it. And then you will see not just live chat automatically click, because again, live chat is automatic when you're on these things. But now it is live chat AI overview. So they're not even going to give you the chats anymore. They're going to let AI dictate what was important. You have to uncheck that, and then you have to check live chat replay. You can't even do it on the initial setup. That's on purpose, folks. That's an example of narrative management at the highest levels on the micro. What are your thoughts?
I had no idea. I know that even just Google searching, there's immediately an AI overview that comes up now these days as well. But I had no idea that it give you an overview of the video that you're getting ready to premiere, basically just to tell the audience whether or not they should watch it or not, or what it's about. But it doesn't surprise me. I mean, these are going to get more and more sophisticated as they continually roll these out. ChatGPT 5, I heard, is just around the corner. And that's going to basically combine all of the different functions that they have, the operator, the agent, all this into one. And it's going to be pervasive in society. And then you have all these commercial aspects of it, too, where banks are starting to get involved. All these businesses are starting to incorporate the API into their business. Going back to what you said of what we can do about it, that's a really hard question, because this is the cat's out of the bag. I mean, you can't put it back in at this point with the overwhelming investment in the rhetoric around it. Like I said, the Cold War rhetoric, where they're able to justify all these different infringements on our basically on our rights and our personal liberty, just to say that we have to beat China to it, because if China gets a hold of this before us, then we're going to be. It's basically also the military industrial complex is really what's driving this. They're the ones who made all these initial investments, even with Google or Meta, Facebook. In-Q-Tel is always an early investor in it. So when it really boils down to it, it really is the military industrial complex that's driving all this. And if you don't think this is going to be weaponized against us, then you haven't been paying attention to the last 30, 40 years.
One of the huge aspects is that, you talked about the Cold War, and essentially during the Cold War, you have this system where not only do you have misinformation, disinformation being spread among the populaces, but you also seem to have this theme of technologies being classified from the people, what for warfare. purposes. And a lot of people do not know that the current state of AI is all being driven, at least in this country, through the CAIO program, the Chief AI Officer program. And what does that mean? Well, that means that you're going to have a government official inside your business if you are doing anything on the software or hardware end of artificial intelligence. You are constantly under audit. In other words, there is nothing of yours that is proprietary. And the only entities that are exempt from this audit are the intel communities and the Defense Department. So you can't even get into this arena without the attachment of the military-industrial complex that can essentially take your proprietary technologies, classify them, and utilize them for whatever we want. Doesn't sound too free market to me, Josh.
Well, guess who else does that? The CCP. If you want to run a business in China, they have something similar to that. I don't know if it's around AI, but basically a party member that sits in the building with the people there and makes sure that they are basically towing the party line. So, I mean, essentially, they're saying we got to do this because we don't want China to get ahead of us. But what they're really doing is adopting a lot of the policies that China uses. You know what I mean? The social credit score is kind of already used on X. You know what I mean? The way that they can deboost, and it's just kind of like a stealth social credit score. I mean, I have 160-some thousand followers, and I was looking through my posts, and I get about 3,000 views on average, with most of my posts these days, just because, I put a lot of content out there that challenges the narrative. And the last one I put out, which I've really seen just a dive in my engagement, was on Susan Moranis, who's the new CDC person, who's from DARPA, you know what I mean? She's from BARDA, and kind of did an expose on her background. And since then, I mean, I can't get any traction on anything that I post on there. And it's algorithmic social credit score, essentially. And that's what they're bringing here. They're just mirroring it from what's going on in China, just by another name. And we just have to really, the only way we can get away from this is to have some type of anti-technology movement, is the way it seems. You know what I mean? Eventually, you're just going to have to say, no, we're going to turn off all this shit and start living our lives, because we have no say in it in the first place. It's just ultra surveillance, and they want to destroy the job markets, deindustrialize. Basically, it's WEF plan to a T is what they want to do, the Great Reset. And that's what we're living through right now, but it doesn't seem like it because we're kind of victims of the moment, you know what I mean? But when you start stepping back and look at what's really going on here, Western civilization's heading down a very dark path with this like technocratic elite that's basically running everything that are unaccountable to anybody.
So you mentioned kind of the Internet of Bodies and therapy, right? We're going to AI for therapy. Yeah. Now, I'm as bad as anybody. I've got the track trace database, little watch on here all the time. I only utilize it when I'm really driving and I want to do speech to text on that. You mentioned the idea that, all this information is accessible by the government. I would argue that all of our communications have been accessible by the government for a very long time. Hepting versus AT&T, when they had Norris Insight systems in AT&T and Verizon. Essentially, you just had a siphon where the thing was split off for the communications on one end, and one end went to the NSA. I talked about NASA earlier. Dennis Bushnell, who was the chief scientist there, bragged about how Google is essentially the global brain, and that we are going to read all of your emails, all of your text messages. We're going to listen to all of your phone calls. And we're not only going to create digital twinning systems, but we're also creating these AI models. Now, I bring up the digital twin system because right now, NVIDIA is utilizing it for factories that have been built and are going to be built. But it also gets into a micro level of your digital twin. And that gets into the transhumanism aspect and people like Martine Rothblatt trying to sell you basically on an avatar of yourself as some type of a digital assistant. Where do you see those two aspects going in the next 5 to 10 years? Because just like you said, people are talking to these things, They're building relationships. They're going to it for therapy. We've now seen, the loser sphere trying to say that, they got an AI girlfriend. I've even seen some people in the alternative media talking about their AI girlfriends. Is this just where...
That's just pathetic.
Yeah, I mean, well, is this just where literally people just lose their humanity and start delving into this realm where their biological and psychological realities just go completely off the rails because of this AI?
I think you nailed it. That's kind of the point of this transhumanism that's going on here. I mean, there's been stories, like you said, of a guy who said he wanted to marry his AI companion. You know what I mean? Like, as if that's something that can be done in reality. He was actually married to a real woman. We are having a crisis of meaning within our society, I think, widely within Western civilization. And in Asia too. I mean, China has its gigantic problems. A lot of these Asian, like Japan, they're not even having sex in Japan. They're losing their population just because they're not interacting with each other and having families. So, I mean, once you start, the AI is like the gasoline on this technocracy. You know what I mean? Because it's accelerating everything, and everybody's going to be immersed in their own little world. There's even companies out there that I've seen that can use all the data of your dead loved ones to create an avatar where you can have a conversation with supposedly your dead loved one. And that's where we're heading with this. I think we don't have connection like we once had in the past with people. I mean, it's amazing that me and you can sit here and talk in real time like this, but it lacks the actual being in person. There's a huge difference, but they want to kind of siphon everybody into their houses with AR or VR goggles, creating simulated realities where they can interact. And the sad part is that a huge percentage of society, especially like the gaming types too, have been so used to this growing up that they will welcome that into their lives to try and squeeze some type of meaning out of their lives in this way. So I think it's going to be truly dystopic once it's fully formed and where we're heading as far as the route that we're on right now. And again, going back to surveillance, this is all tracked, traced, databased, modeled. You know what I mean? They're able to use behavioral psychology because with the data that they're using. Even like on X and social media, the amount of manipulation that goes on with that is far beyond what we probably are really aware of with the bots and things of that nature, and the way that they're able to deboost you or manipulate public opinion. I mean, it's really it's disturbing once you kind of step back and view it from a meta perspective. Like, we're just like lacking meaning as a whole, and they're trying to fill that void with all this AI and technology, and people are willingly just taking it into their lives. You know what I mean? There's kids that sit on Xbox all day for 12, 15 hours, playing all day long, talking on their headsets. They have no interest in meeting women or going out and talking to anybody, building actual real life relationships, having kids. And it's not just males too. Females are in this category as well these days. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's just again, we're prisoner of the moment, and we don't really take the time to step back and say, what are we actually doing here? Like, what is the point of all this? Why do we need all this super technology? What's it going to do to enrich our lives aside from making some things more convenient? But they're just full steam ahead with it. And what can somebody like you and I do to really stop the train that's heading directly at us?
Well, I don't know that we're going to be able to stop anything. I think that each individual is going to have to navigate their own situation. I think that's why discernment is really the key. This whole idea that I'd rather not know. I'm sorry. Ignorance is not bliss, especially in a time where technology is advancing at such a rapid pace. So you talked about this idea not only of a digital twin, but an avatar after the fact of somebody's loved one. And essentially, we are moving in that direction in the sense that people are not only willing to accept that everything is digitally tracked, traced, and databased, but that digital avatar essentially can become you, and can be conscious itself. And you see more and more of this idea that, this digital twin, like you said, isn't just a replica of your loved one. It's eventually going to be your loved one. And when you look at that transhumanism, you mentioned those that are online all day and playing video games. Ready Player One kind of predicts this society where the physical world is in such shambles that everybody wants to be in this virtual world. Well, the elites are telling us that we're going to be able to take this digital consciousness and upload it into a metaverse-like place where we can live forever. That really isn't us, is it, Josh? And then at the same time, we see this human experimentation to merge man with machine, and it seems to me that this same class of people that's trying to sell the general populace on you're going to be able to upload your consciousness want to biologically live forever by experimenting on us. What are your thoughts on that?
That's actually the transhumanist goal, right? To basically, they believe that through technology we'll be able to create immortality. And the Neuralink thing and all these BCIs that are coming out, the brain-computer interfaces, are a step towards that. They're kind of using it as a way to stop disabilities and things. Which there are use cases for it, but you don't think they're going to keep stepping this forward and embedding it into your brain even further to try and do what you just said, which is experiment and upload consciousness into the cloud. That way you can experience things outside of your body. Like Elon Musk talks about telepathy in a way that they're trying to use.
That's the product name. Like, people don't realize, like, literally blind sight and telepathy are the two initial product names of this Neuralink. Continue.
Well, I mean, it's crazy. Have you seen the demos of how they've used this with individuals who are paralyzed?
Yes.
And I've been trying to wrap my head around, like, how are they able to, using thoughts, create the cursor to move? It's like a deeply philosophical thing when you start thinking about it. Like,
well, Josh, let me say this about that technology, because I think that people, first of all, and if you watch, we did a watch along with about 2/3 of that. I should do the last 20 minutes, but we got to the point where all 6 of them, 6 out of the 7 of them are playing Mario Kart with their minds, including the 2 ALS individuals, one of which is completely nonverbal and paralyzed. Here's the thing. When they show you the process in which they map their brain waves to the controller, they have to program it. So in other words, they're sitting there and they're doing these small tasks that then get their brain to do that. All of that was commercially and publicly available via wearables. And what do I mean by that? I was doing videos a decade ago where it's this, I forget, it was like New Wave or something like this. You'd wear the device. And this is why I often talk about brain-computer interfaces that are non-invasive. Let me repeat that. Non-invasive. And essentially, your neurons would trigger, and they would have like a down the line, A, B, C, D, all the way down to Y, and they would connect. And all of a sudden, you would be able to control your cursor, and you would be able to type after, but you had to train it. I don't see much difference between that and what is being done here. Now, I also understand the concern that if you are dealing with somebody that has, ALS is completely nonverbal, who's to say what's programming anything? Who's to say what's putting it out there, et cetera? I think that is a large concern. But I think the larger one is the fact that they're using people that, obviously, if I was in a chair, bro, and I was neck down, I'd probably want this technology just to be able to use Photoshop, right? Then that was one of the things the guy was talking about, was being able to develop his own graphics for what's on a hat. But they are very open that they want to not only commercially put this out there, but they want to create a collective, a hive-like mind structure where it's not just readable, it's writable to your brain. And if you get to that level, I mean, how much free will could you possibly have if you have a device that is internally attached to your brain functions, and people, for some reason, do not see how dangerous that is, Josh?
it comes back to what these individuals, these transhumanists, see humans as. You know what I mean? They see us as machines. If you hear these people talk, they always say that the brain is basically a computer. You know what I mean? They're always comparing it to things that has been made with from human ingenuity. So they're like they're flipping the script on what it means to actually be human. They look at us as basically mechanistic, uh, biological machines that can be manipulated and improved in their mind. And like you said, they are just all they're doing is patterning. So when they're training to do these things, because I've been trying to understand this, because when you look at it, when you're watching it, it looks like magic. But what they're doing is basically creating artificial neurons, um, neural nets within their system that is mimicking what is going on in these individuals' brains and creating patterns that correlate to the different motions and activities that they want to do. So, as you said, you take this a step further. Where does this all end? It's not as if this technology is going to get worse. It's only going to be improving, and they're going to eventually be able to do it where, like you said, it's non-invasive, where it's something that they can strap on your head and it's able to map your entire brain and put you in a simulation of a world, which is where I think they're all trying to take this. Which then again, it's track, trace, database, using your personal information, your consciousness itself as the fuel to these systems. So I mean, it's dark when you start really like thinking about where this all goes, because we're already at a point where, like you said, we have individuals who have ALS that are able to put electrodes in their brains and control a computer and talk to individuals around them, which is amazing in itself. But that's not where they're trying to stop this. It's not like, all right, mission accomplished. This is, hey, we have a market now. We got to perfect this. And now it's due it to individuals who just want to accept this in their life, whether they have a disability or not. You know what I mean? They see it as a market that they can tap into and create like this weird collective consciousness, Ready Player One simulation where you've seen the NVIDIA things where they train robots with the digital twins. They're basically doing exact replications with the physics and everything in the real world and training these robots to do tasks over and over again, which is creating these patterns, so to speak, which then can be applied in the real world. I mean, we're only like 2 or 3 years away from like mass robotics, like humanoid robots being walking down the street beside us. I mean, people don't realize what is coming down the pike. If you watch some videos in China, they have humanoid robots running around in parks and shit. You know what I mean? And where do those things are going to be used and weaponized as well? That's like the future of warfare with all this drone technology as well. It's just we're just like sleepwalking into this like hellscape Terminator future. But we're just worried about the next Madden that's coming out next year. Most people like it just blows my mind.
So I've got to do a video on the recent explosion of the humanoid robots that are now walking around in China because, like you said, you're starting to see more and more of them. They're ending up at kiosks, cooking burgers, doing pizzas with other robotic gear as well. But there's a few things you talked about. You talked about NVIDIA, for instance. And I did a watch along with that latest NVIDIA presentation where, again, to sell you on this, they're showing you a robot that literally looks and sounds like it comes out of the Star Wars series, right? And when they demo that thing, what is it? It's a robot that sounds just like R2-D2, looks exactly like Wall-E, and it's in the desert. Looks like it's in Tatooine. And then it wheels out again. It's making noises. There's no reason for it. It's not a language, right? It just wants you.
Cute.
Yeah, it wants you to think it's cute and harmless and look like it comes up on here. But then, you talk about the actual abilities of these things. And it's funny because Musk, in that presentation that just happened, I think about a month ago now, maybe a month and a half ago, he talks about how, number one, some people say that none of this is possible with the human brain interfaces. And he goes, and some people say all of this stuff has already been done. And then he goes, in reality, we have been putting chips in humans for decades, right? And again, if you're following this, you know this. NASA's chief scientist, 2018, says they'd already put 200,000 1,000 of these devices in human beings. Now, this is going to speak to the fact that just, again, it's almost impossible to find old stories. But I pulled this one up, and this one is in 2023. The reason I pulled this one up is because I had to go back to my film Invisible Empire, because that same company had been utilizing that same chip technology all the way back in 2010 to try to get visuals into people's brains. Now, you're not going to see like a normal person. I liken it to the idea of you're watching the Predator movie, and instead of heat signatures, you're seeing motion signatures. So a lot of blurs and things like that. Obviously, it's gotten better. But if you also notice, the same company that was selling you on the idea of a brain chip so that you could see, what's it say right here? Oh, we're going to treat blindness, paralysis, and in big letters, depression.
Depression.
And by the way, that company is now a part of BlackRock Neurotech. So,
oh, great.
Yeah, you have Musk on one side with Neuralink, but then the other main competitor in this arena is literally BlackRock. And when we're talking about depression, I just want people to take a step back. What has our modern medicinal field done in a positive manner to treat depression in this country? Depression's off the charts in this country. More people are drugged than ever. We finally have more and more mainline studies coming out showing that these SSRIs literally have no value. When you put them into a controlled environment against those that did not take them and have depression.
The chemical imbalance theory of depression is a complete myth. You know, I think a couple years ago, a meta study came out showing that like this, it's a complete bullshit myth. And they're giving Paxil and all these SRIs to kids. This has been happening since the early 90s. Kids were hanging themselves. They approved these drugs without even doing proper studies. Suicide ideation. You know, even if you go to school shootings, almost every one of these school shooters have had some type of chemical lobotomy because they've been put on this SSRIs. But you said it right there. But first of all, if you ask those individuals who are doing these chip interfaces to treat depression what depression is, they can't even give you a direct answer on it. No one knows what depression is. You know what I mean? It's just a way to pathologize people's lives and their normal behavior in order to give them something for it that's a massive profit. So that's where they're going. You know, we've been doing electrotherapy since like the 70s on people, you know, to treat depression. This isn't something new. It's just more high tech, and they're just going to continually roll it out. And it's always going back to pharmaceuticals or giving you something to treat something that you don't like with your life, you know. And the reason people are so depressed is because of look around the society that we're living in. You know what I mean? That's why people have a lot of discontent. And like I said earlier, there's a lack of meaning in a lot of people's lives these days, especially young people. The COVID pandemic only precipitated that as far as in teenagers and young people, especially females. During that period, they haven't recovered back to the baseline prior to that as far as mental health is concerned. But again, it's just they pathologize everything in order to give you a product that's going to be super expensive that you're going to have to be on for life. Like, you know, now you can be obese and you get put on Ozempic, but people don't realize that in the fine print of Ozempic, they literally say, "Oh, you know what? By the way, you got to take this for life. This is the product that you have to take forever if you want it to work, because if you don't, you're just going to get fat again." You know what I mean? Basically, and it's just not to get off topic, but the side effects of this we're just now starting to see, where it withers away people's bones. You know what I mean? People look weird that have been on it as well. They have that sunken zombie-looking face as well, and it's causing all kind of stomach issues, stomach paralysis. We're just now starting to see the downstream effects of something that they should have. The studies just aren't there as far as these medications are concerned, and it's ruining like a whole entire generation right under our nose because people are so like obsessed with vanity and wanting to lose weight and look good for social media, things of that nature. So there's so many disasters concurrently happening right now in our society that it's hard to really wrap your head around and understand how we can get out of this when we have all these giant pharmaceutical companies, the government, the military industrial complex, all bearing down on us at the same time in the technology and all that, trying to say there's something wrong with us. Like I said, pathologizing normal human behavior. People become sad sometimes. People become happy sometimes. People are pensive sometimes. These are natural things that happen based upon what's going on in your life. You don't have to like take a magic pill to cure everything or put fucking electrodes in your brain in order to make you feel better, which is what they're trying to do.
And just to hit on that, electroshock therapy thing, I would encourage people to go watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That's a film literally that has stood the test of time, and in a lot of ways you think you're watching kind of like this lighthearted comedy drama, and by the end of it, it just has this huge, dark, poignant, just oh my goodness, what have we done? That makes you really rethink and relook at that treatment of those that they deemed quote unquote mentally unstable or clinically insane.
Around the same time, like in the 60s and 70s, they were lobotomizing people in Central Park in New York. You know what I mean? People were lining up and getting essentially like stabs through their eye socket into their brain, saying, and the person who did that, I can't remember his name now, but he actually won the Nobel Prize for Medicine for lobotomizing people. I mean, people don't understand like how disturbing that is. Like, people would get up on a Sunday, walk down to Central Park with their loved one that they think there's something wrong with them, stand in a line, and then get a sphere or something shoved through their eye socket into the brain to lobotomize them, and they called it science. And those people are never the same ever again. And they gave the guy who made it an award, the highest scientific medical award that you can get. So that gives you an idea of how misplaced and misguided so many times people we've been, when it comes to medicine and experimentation on human beings, that but we just keep going back to the well and redoing it over again, just in different ways.
We got a few minutes left in the broadcast. What are you working on right now? What should people be looking at right now, and how can they directly support your work?
Yeah, I mean, you can just follow me on Twitter at Josh Walkos. I do have a Substack called WeTheFree.substack.com. Right now, I'm actually working on a couple retrospectives, which are recent history, which I think is important for people to understand, because we just lived through, this pandemic and the whole Russiagate affair and all that. And those are two major things that I think need to be revisited to kind of refresh people's mind on actually what happened here. I'm trying to compile a lot of basically evidence to show and give you kind of a retrospective and a timeline of like what we just lived through when it comes to the pandemic. And then also with Russiagate, I mean, people don't understand, and you've covered this as well, quite well. It's not like we're the biggest Trump fans or anything like that. This isn't in defense of Trump when it comes to Russiagate. It's pointing out the fact that we had what essentially amounts to a soft coup with our intelligence agencies and the FBI trying to overthrow a duly elected president by painting him as a Russian asset. And not only that, all of society and media followed in lockstep. And now I think it's a good time, especially since they're kind of bringing this back out in the news cycle, to revisit that, point out some of these stories and how wrong all these individuals were, because people need to really go to jail for that. I'm not going to hold my breath on it. They're basically using it as a distraction for the Epstein thing right now, in my opinion. Bringing this out all of a sudden. Oh, look over here, it's Obama. He did this. Not wanting to talk about how they mishandled the whole Epstein file release and all that. But that's what I'm working on, and hopefully people will like it. It's going to be two very long and extensive articles, but I think they're important to kind of refresh people's minds of like recent history and put a frame around it to understand what really happened.
Well, I have to agree with you that there is a plethora of evidence that obviously they spied on Trump's campaign and created this framework of him being an asset, knowing full well otherwise. However, I think it's going to be an impossibility to get any type of meaningful indictments, prosecutions, and eventually punishments. We've had the Supreme Court rule now that a president basically can do whatever they like. That you'd have to get to the level of treason I don't think that they could prove that in a court of law, especially when you look at that court of law and how partisan it would actually be. I'm not holding my breath for Clapper, Comey, Brennan. I think, unfortunately, that this is just kind of a sideshow, like you said, for the fact that we're not going to get accountability or even a fraction of what is available via the Epstein files. I think that the conversations the DOJ is having right now with Ghislaine Maxwell behind closed doors is how they're going to take care of this issue with a limited hangout investigation and then declaration, unfortunately. And look, again, I'm not here stumping for Trump, but it seems to me they did try to get a soft coup on the guy. It seems to me they did try to shoot the guy in the head. And what's he able to do back? Continue wars in the Middle East and continue wars in Russia and Ukraine and sign on to a lot of this technocracy because people like Peter Thiel were integral in getting him elected this time around. And that shows with J.D. Vance.
He's the shadow president.
I mean, again, if you think it was Barron Trump that told Donald to get on the podcast train and not Peter Thiel and the gang, I don't know what to tell you. There was a reason that Peter Thiel was on Joe Rogan just before Elon Musk was on Joe Rogan and just before
we didn't
Donald
even
Trump.
mention Palantir.
We could have done a whole show on Palantir. Yeah. And in fact, we will have to do that whole show. The website is wethefree.substack.com, wethefree.substack.com. And then you can follow him at Josh Walkos, or just type in Champagne Joshy and you will find him. Sir, it has been a pleasure as always. Thank you so much. And folks, you know the drill. It is not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. I absolutely love you guys, and we'll see you on the flip side.